Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Thanks for tuning in. Today I've got a subscriber question that I want to answer. And if you're not a subscriber already, please hit that subscriber button, hit the bell next to it. I could use all the subscribers that I can get, guys. It makes doing this worthwhile, so I appreciate it if you hit the subscriber button. If you like the video, hit the like button. And if you've got questions, please leave the comments. I definitely like answering questions that people have. If I can help you guys catch more fish, this is all worthwhile. So the question that I got today has to do with boat positioning and what the ideal boat positioning is for both fishing offshore and on the shoreline. And I think there's a lot of different ways to approach this. But for me, the biggest issue is how can I position the boat without spooking the fish or screwing up the school of fish that I'm fishing? So when I approach an offshore spot, we'll talk about offshore first. So when I approach an offshore spot, the majority of the time I will have a specific target in mind, whether that's a brush pile, a rock pile, a sweet spot on a ledge. There's a very specific target that I want to fish. And if that's the case, I will almost always try to position the boat where I am downwind from the spot so that I can put the front of the boat facing my target. I want the very nose of the boat pointing right at the target that I have to fish. And I do that for a couple of reasons. The first being, one, I don't have to worry about the wind pushing me up onto my spot. I can, easily position the boat. If I catch a fish on a cast, while I'm putting the fish in the live well or messing around with that, I'm not going to get blown up onto the spot and potentially ruin that fishing spot. So that's probably the most important reason. The second reason I do that, though, is so that when I cast past the spot, and then my bait is coming downwind or downstream with the current. And I do believe that fish more times than not will position themselves into the current, whether that's wind generated current or river current. I just believe that the fish will usually be nose forward into the current because they're opportunistic and they're waiting for their next meal to float by. So I want my bait coming downstream past the target that I'm fishing. So that's the second biggest reason. And when it comes to, when I'm making that position, I'm trying to stay away from my target pretty much as far as possible. I think the sweet spot is anywhere from about 60 feet or further. So, I'm usually making pretty much as long of a cast as I can make to fish that target and to do it efficiently. I'm not trying to outdistance, myself where I can't set the hook properly, but I do want to be as far away from that target as possible to prevent spooking the fish. So I feel like 60 feet or more is the ideal if you can do that. Sometimes if the wind's really howling, it's just hard to make super long casts, or, if you're fishing really deep with, say, a crankbait, that you got to get your bait down into that sweet spot. So you're gonna adjust your cast to hit your target. But if you can stay at least 60 feet away from that target, that's the ideal. And then after I fished that location or that specific piece of structure from facing directly into the wind, at that point I'll then start rotating around. Especially if I'm not getting bit, I'll rotate around it if I think there's fish there and start getting different angles at that target. At that point, we do have a lot of anglers nowadays have like GPS lock systems with their trolling motor, which makes holding around the target easier, but it also makes locating that target a little harder. You really got to use your electronic equipment to make sure that you know what angle to make that cast at. But the fact that you have GPS lock on your trolling motor will allow you to position in the wind in different areas around that target. So, that's kind of my process. I always start facing into the wind, and then I'll rotate around it to make sure that I fished that target efficiently. And thoroughly. So that's my offshore approach. When it comes to fishing shoreline stuff, it's pretty similar. If I can, I will almost always try to work the shoreline facing into the wind. And again, that goes, the primary reason for that is so that if I'm fishing a target and say, you know, I catch a fish, or maybe I want to make 5 or 6 casts at a lay down log or a dock, if I've got the wind behind my back, it just really limits the amount of time that I'm going to get to fish that object, because it's pushing me into the object. And I realize I have a trolling motor and I can be pushing myself away, but when you're fishing the shoreline, you really want to stay off the trolling motor as much as possible. So I'd rather not have the trolling motor pushing the boat backwards into the wind, which is pushing the trolling motor prop wash towards my target, which, you know, I think a lot of times people don't realize how far that prop wash can actually go. So, you know, I don't want to have that wind pushing me into the target. I want to make sure that the wind's going to be pushing me away from the target, which means I need to be going down the bank into the wind. So that's the biggest thing. I also then like to stay away from my targets if I can. Sometimes you're fishing close quarters and you can't really do that, but ideally I like to be at least 40 feet away from the target that I'm fishing. I feel like that's a good distance to not still spook your fish, but to be able to get those fish to react without knowing that you're there. And quite often when you're fishing the bank, you are fishing structure, whether that's some form of weed, whether that's a dock, whether it's, you know, a lay down, and those fish are holding on that specific target. So if they're on that target, you know where they're going to be, and you can make the right cast from 40 feet away, and they feel more comfortable in that structure that they're holding in. So the chances of them spooking easily is not really going to happen until you get, you know, to a much closer distance. But I feel like 40 feet is really the ideal distance when you're fishing the shoreline. So, you know, those are really that's really kind of it for boat positioning. You know, it's comes down to trying to stay away from your object to prevent from spooking your fish, and you want to be able to present your bait properly. So you want to be aware of wind condition or current conditions, and you know, if you do those, I do think that you will benefit yourself and get more bites while you're on the water without spooking your fish. So guys, give it a try. Let me know what you think. If you've got other ideas or other approaches, please leave it in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you guys think is the right approach, and a lot of times I get really good information back from you guys who are watching. So please share. I appreciate all the input, and thanks for watching, guys.